Dusty Rawlins was a man no one much noticed, a quiet cowboy hardened by the land, with little more than his name and his word to his credit. But when he gave his last piece of bread to a stranger's child, he set loose a chain of events that would draw riders to his door, turn friends into foes, and force him to face a choice that could cost him everything. And it all began with that one simple act. The Texas dawn broke blood red over the endless plains, casting long shadows across the dust-choked trail. Jacob Dusty Rawlins wiped the sweat from his brow as he hitched his old mule to the wagon, the last of his supplies packed tight. Dusty was a man who owned little but his word and his grit. 40 years on this hard land had taught him that mercy was a rare thing, and often costly. As he turned to mount his wagon, he spotted something at the edge of his property. A small figure stumbling along the dry creek bed. A child, no more than 7 or 8, skin sun-darkened, legs trembling with hunger. The boy's eyes, hollow with need, met Dusty's for a heartbeat that seemed to stretch forever. No rifle in his hand, no war party behind him. Just a child, orphaned by the cruel hand of fate. Most would have sent him away. Too dangerous. Too many stories of settlers meeting ruin for showing kindness. But Dusty remembered a different time, when he too had been lost and starving, and a stranger's bread had saved his life. Without a word, he dug into his satchel and pulled out the last chunk of bread he owned. Hard crust, but food all the same. He walked slow, deliberate, hands open, and knelt before the child. "Here, son. Ain't much, but it's yours." The boy took it with shaking hands, eyes wide with something like disbelief. He devoured it in seconds, and when he was done, he looked at Dusty and whispered a word Dusty did not understand, but felt deep in his bones. And then the boy was gone, swallowed by the prairie. Dusty watched the empty trail and felt the weight of what he'd done settle heavy on his heart. But when the sun rose the next morning, the horizon was black with riders. 800 silent warriors lined up outside his homestead, waiting. Dusty stood frozen on his porch, the dry boards creaking beneath his boots. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest as he took in the sight no man ever expects to see. A wall of horsemen stretching as far as the eye could see. Their faces painted, their bodies still as stone, the morning sun glinting off spear tips and rifle barrels. 800 warriors. Maybe more. The air was thick, heavy with the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Not a word, not a cry, not even the whinny of a restless horse. Dusty's old hound whimpered low at his feet, tail tucked, ears flat. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Dusty licked his dry lips and forced himself to step down from the porch, hands raised high. His voice came out rough, choked by dust and fear. "I don't want no trouble," he called, his words thin against that endless line of riders. "If I've done you wrong, tell me how I can make it right." For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. The warriors sat like statues, their dark eyes fixed on him, unreadable. Dusty's mind raced. Was it the boy? Was this retribution? Or had his simple act of kindness somehow summoned judgment upon him? Then, from the center of the formation, one rider moved forward. His horse stepped slow and sure, and as he drew closer, Dusty saw the lines of age and wisdom carved into the man's face. A chief, no doubt. Feathers woven into his hair, beads and bone adorning his deerskin coat. The chief stopped a dozen paces away, his gaze locked on Dusty's. When he spoke, his voice was low, deep as the earth itself. "You gave bread to my grandson when he was lost. Today we come not for blood, but for thanks." Dusty's knees nearly gave out beneath him. 800 warriors. And they had come in peace? But what kind of thanks could a war chief and his riders bring? And why the silence that still gripped them all? Dusty swallowed hard, his throat dry as the prairie dust. The chief sat tall in his saddle, his dark eyes steady, filled with something Dusty couldn't quite name. Respect, perhaps, or sorrow. The silence of 800 warriors pressed on the air like a weight. Dusty's old hound whimpered again, and slunk back beneath the porch. The chief dismounted slowly, his moccasins stirring the dust. He stood before Dusty, a head taller, his face lined with years of hardship, his voice low and steady. "Many moons, my people, have known only betrayal from your kind," the chief said, his English rough but clear. "But yesterday you saw a starving child, my blood, and you gave him life when you could have turned away." Dusty shook his head, still half believing this was some fever dream. "It was just a crust of bread, sir. Any man would have done the same." The chief's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in sadness. "No, not any man. That bread was all you had, my grandson told me. And so we ride, not to take, but to give." At this, the chief raised his arm, and at last the silence broke. A great drum sounded from within the line of warriors, a slow, deep rhythm that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the land itself. And as that drumbeat filled the air, the warriors began to move, not toward Dusty's homestead in fury, but past it. Columns of riders, their faces proud, their weapons lowered, guiding ponies burdened with sacks of maize, smoked meat, fresh hides, and tools. Dusty could only stare, his breath caught in his chest. The chief turned back to him, voice quiet as the breeze. "Your kindness will not be forgotten. Today, we repay a debt of honor. But know this, Dusty Rawlins, you have made allies and enemies with that one piece of bread." And as the riders filed past, Dusty felt it, the ground trembling beneath the hooves of 800 warriors, a tide of history passing his door. Dusty stood rooted, watching the endless line of riders pass, each warrior offering him a silent nod, their faces solemn beneath painted stripes of red and black. Ponies laden with gifts moved alongside them, baskets of beans and corn, bundles of fur, even a carved bow that looked too fine for hunting. The weight of it all settled heavy on Dusty's heart. He had expected death at dawn, and instead he was being repaid 100-fold. But as the last riders faded into the horizon's heat shimmer, the prairie seemed to hold its breath again. Dusty wiped a trembling hand across his brow, the realization settling in like the first chill of winter. The world would not understand this. Neighbors would see these gifts and whisper of collusion. The law might see him as a traitor, an ally of the tribes in a time when fear ruled men's hearts. Sure enough, before the sun was high, a cloud of dust rose along the southern trail. Dusty squinted, heart sinking. A posse. Maybe a dozen riders, hard men from town, guns slung low, eyes sharp with suspicion. He knew most of them, men he'd shared drink and fence lines with. Men who wouldn't understand what had passed here this morning. "Rawlins!" came the shout as they rode up, eyes scanning the goods piled near his cabin. "What in the devil's name's going on here? We seen the war party ride off. You trading with them now? Hiding out with the enemy?" Dusty stepped forward, hands raised, voice steady though his gut churned. "No trading, no hiding. I gave a starving boy a piece of bread, and they came to thank me, that's all." But the looks they gave him told him plain, simple words would not be enough. Fear had poisoned these men's hearts, and fear made dangerous company. The leader of the posse, Sheriff Amos Keller, a big man with a belly hardened by too much whiskey and too many years on the trail, spat into the dust at Dusty's feet. His gray eyes were cold as river stones. "A piece of bread, Rawlins? That's all it took to bring 800 devils to your door?" The other men shifted in their saddles, uneasy. Their hands strayed too near their gun belts. Dusty could see it plain. They were looking for a reason, any reason to draw. The sight of those gifts stacked by his cabin only stoked the fire of their fear. "I gave what I had," Dusty said, voice low, trying to keep the storm at bay. "You all know me. I ain't no traitor. That boy would have died out there. What was I to do? Let him perish and have his ghost haunt me?" Keller laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. That boy's ghost wouldn't trouble you half as much as the widows and orphans will have if those warriors come back with murder in their hearts. You think you bought their friendship, Dusty? All you done is make yourself a mark. Next time they come, it won't be gifts they bring." The men muttered agreement, fear turning sharp as knives. Dusty raised his hands higher. "You're wrong, Amos. They came in peace. I reckon we should be grateful. Maybe this land don't have to bleed no more." But Keller wasn't listening. His hand fell to his Colt's grip. "We can't risk it. Can't let no man invite danger to our doorstep. Boys, seize him. We'll bring him to town. Let the judge decide if mercy's worth the gallows." Dusty's heart thundered. He could run, but he'd never outrun bullets. He could fight, but he'd never draw faster than 12 scared men. Or he could try one last time to reason with men who'd forgotten how. Dusty felt the weight of a dozen guns in the hands of men who once called him friend. The prairie sun climbed higher, hot and merciless, and the air seemed to crackle with tension. His old hound whined low from under the porch, sensing the storm about to break. Keller's voice came again, harder now, like a judge passing sentence. "Don't make this worse, Rollins. Come quiet. Let the judge sort it out. But if you so much as twitch for that rifle, you won't see sundown." Dusty's eyes flicked to the long gun resting by the cabin door. Too far, and too many watching. He took a breath, slow and steady. "Amos," he said, "you remember the winter of '73? When your boy near froze in that blizzard and I rode half the night to fetch him home? You called me brother then. That mean nothing now?" Keller's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking at his temple. For a moment, Dusty thought he saw the man he'd once known, the man who'd shared coffee and quiet mornings on the trail. But fear was a stronger poison than friendship. "Times have changed, Dusty. We can't afford to trust no more. Not when it might cost us our kin." His hand tightened on his Colt. The other men shifted again, some glancing at Keller, some at Dusty, doubt flickering in their eyes. A younger rancher, Tom Barlow, not yet 30, spoke up, his voice uncertain. "Sheriff, maybe we ought to think on this. He's always been straight with us." But Keller shook his head. "No more talk. Tie him. Now." The men hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear, justice and panic. And Dusty knew this was the moment that would decide whether blood stained the dust this day. And from the far ridge, a new dust cloud rose. All eyes turned to the horizon where that dust cloud boiled up against the morning sky. The posse froze, hands hovering near their pistols, unsure whether salvation or doom rode toward them. Even Keller's hard face paled a shade, his bravado flickering like a candle in the wind. Dusty narrowed his eyes, heart thudding. The riders came fast. A tight group, maybe a dozen, their silhouettes sharp against the sun's glare. Not Comanche, not Apache. No war paint, no feathers streaming. These were white men, ranchers or drifters by the look of them, armed and riding hard. Tom Barlow's voice cracked the tension. "That's Caldwell's boys, from over near the Brazos." Indeed it was. Buck Caldwell, a big rancher known for his sharp tongue and sharper aim, led the pack, his Mustang lathered with sweat. They reined up hard, dust billowing. Buck's sharp eyes swept the scene. The posse, the piled gifts, Dusty standing with his hands raised like a condemned man. "What in blazes is going on here, Keller?" Buck barked, swinging down from his saddle. "We seen that war party ride out at dawn, peaceful as you please. Now I find you with guns on Dusty Rollins like he's some cattle thief." Keller's face darkened with frustration. "He's made league with them, Buck. Brought 800 warriors to our door with his fool kindness. Next time it won't be gifts they leave behind. I'm taking him in before his mercy gets us all killed." But Buck wasn't buying it. He looked to Dusty, then to the stacked goods. "All this for a piece of bread?" Dusty nodded, his voice steady at last. "That's the truth of it." Buck spat into the dirt, shook his head. Well, hell, if feeding a hungry kid's a crime, maybe we all need hanging. You men really ready to string up a neighbor for showing decency? The posse stirred, uncertainty rippling through them. Keller's hand still gripped his Colt, but his authority was slipping. And then Buck said the words that turned the tide. You raise that gun, Amos, and you'll be starting a war of your own with me. For a long, breathless moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind sighing across the prairie, stirring the dust between two groups of men on the edge of ruin. Keller's eyes burned with frustration, his hand clenched tight on the butt of his Colt. But Buck Caldwell stood firm, his own gun hand resting easy near his holster, steady as bedrock. "You'd draw on me, Buck?" Keller growled, his voice low, dangerous. "After all these years, you'd side with him over your own sheriff?" Buck didn't flinch. His gaze was hard, unblinking. "I'm siding with what's right. And right now, Amos, you're fixing to hang a man for showing a starving boy mercy. That ain't law. That's madness." The posse shifted again, unease rippling through them. Tom Barlow lowered his rifle, glancing at Keller, then at Buck, then at Dusty. Others followed, the tension easing just a hair, like a coiled spring loosening. Dusty felt his breath come easier, but he didn't lower his hands. Not yet. "Amos, don't do this," he said quietly. "You pull iron, you'll start something none of us can take back." Keller's jaw worked, torn between pride and reason, fear and friendship. His knuckles went white on his Colt. The world seemed to hang on a knife's edge. Then, from over the rise behind Buck's men, another sight appeared. A single rider, young and thin, with a Comanche bead necklace glinting at his throat. The boy Dusty had fed. He rode slowly, hands open, no weapon drawn, his dark eyes fixed on the crowd below. And behind him, far behind, the glint of more warriors watching from the distant hills, silent as the grave. The boy halted his pony and raised a hand, not in threat, but in peace. And in that gesture, Dusty saw it, the truth plain as day. Kindness had brought him to this moment. All eyes turned to the boy on the pony. The morning sun gleamed on the beadwork at his throat, and his small figure seemed swallowed by the vastness of the land, yet his presence stilled even the hardest hearts. His gaze swept over the posse, the gifts stacked by Dusty's cabin, and at last rested on Dusty himself. Slowly, deliberately, the boy slid down from his pony. His bare feet stirred the dust as he walked forward, stopping just a few steps from Dusty. In his small hands, he held something wrapped in deerskin. The air seemed to hum with tension as the boy offered it, his dark eyes never leaving Dusty's. Dusty took it gently, unwrapping the bundle with calloused fingers. Inside lay a necklace, beads of bone and turquoise strung with care, and a feather white as snow. A hush fell. Buck, Keller, the posse, even the hound under the porch, all watched, waiting. The boy spoke at last, his voice soft but clear. "My grandfather says this is for the man who saved my spirit. The feather means peace. The beads, honor." Dusty's throat tightened. He looked from the gift to the boy, to the distant line of warriors watching, to the men who'd come to string him up. And in that moment, the prairie seemed to breathe again. Keller's shoulders slumped, the fight gone from him. His hand fell away from his gun. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Buck grinned, the tension breaking like a summer storm. "Looks like you've made yourself a legend, Rawlins." But Dusty knew better. This wasn't the end. The feather and beads might mean peace today, but tomorrow, who could say? And in the hills, the silent watchers turned their ponies, riding back into the wild. The boy mounted his pony again, casting one last glance at Dusty, then turned and rode slow toward the distant ridge where the warriors waited. The line of riders melted into the land, as if they'd never been. The prairie wind rose, whispering through the grass, carrying away the last of the morning's tension. Dusty stood holding the necklace, feeling the smooth beads beneath his fingers. The feather trembled in the breeze, a symbol of peace but also of the fragile thread holding that peace together. The posse shifted, unsure now what to do. Keller holstered his Colt, his face lined with weariness. "This ain't over, Rollins," he said gruffly. "You've got yourself tangled up in something bigger than any of us. There'll be talk. There'll be questions." Dusty met his gaze. "Let 'em talk. I did what was right, not what was easy." Keller nodded, grudging respect in his eyes. "Maybe so. Just hope it don't come back on you. Or on us." Buck clapped Dusty on the shoulder. "If it does, you won't stand alone. We ain't all so quick to see enemies where there are none." The men began to disperse, some shaking their heads, some thoughtful, others still wary. Dusty watched them go, the weight of the day heavy on his heart. He knew the road ahead would be hard. The land didn't forgive easily, and neither did men. As the last rider faded into the distance, Dusty turned, looking out across the endless prairie. Somewhere out there, the boy and his people rode on, and somewhere, danger still lurked, waiting for the next spark to set the plains ablaze. Dusty tied the feather and beads above his cabin door, a quiet promise to himself and the world. Peace, for as long as it could last. But the West was wild, and peace was a fleeting thing. The days after the warriors rode off were quiet, too quiet for Dusty's liking. The prairie seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the next spark. Dusty kept to his work, patching fences and tending what little stock he had left. But the weight of watchful eyes pressed on him. Neighbors didn't come calling. Smoke rose from distant chimneys, but no friendly wave met his gaze. Supplies were running low, and the air felt thick, with the kind of tension that couldn't be ignored. So, at first light, Dusty saddled his mule and rode for town, knowing full well the storm of men's fear might be waiting there. Dusty rode into town beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds, the wind carrying the scent of rain and trouble. Eyes followed him, suspicious, wary, as he tied his mule outside the general store. Folks who once greeted him with a nod or a smile now looked away, whispering behind hands. Fear had done its work. Inside, Jasper Wilkes handed over Dusty's supplies without a word of kindness. "You best not linger, Rollins," he muttered. "Some folk got ideas about you." "About that feather you wear." Dusty nodded, loading his goods, feeling the weight of judgment in every glance. As he mounted, 3 riders blocked the street ahead, hard men, strangers with the look of hired guns. Their leader, tall with a scar down his cheek, smirked. "Dusty Rollins, friend of the Comanche," he said loud enough for all to hear. "You're the reason decent folks sleep with one eye open." Dusty kept his voice level. "I fed a starving boy. That's the whole of it." The man's hand hovered near his gun. "That's not what folks believe. And belief's what kills out here." Before the tension could snap, another rider appeared. Buck Caldwell, rifle across his saddle, eyes fierce. "That's enough. You aim to draw on Rollins, you draw on me too." The scarred man hesitated, reading the steel in Buck's gaze. He spat in the dust. "You're making a mistake, Caldwell. When they come again, don't come looking for me." And with that, he and his men turned and rode out, leaving the street silent but heavy with what almost was. Dusty tipped his hat to Buck. "Much obliged." Buck's answer was firm. "You stood for what's right, Dusty, and I'll stand with you. But this ain't done." Overhead, thunder rolled, and Dusty knew the storm had only just begun. Part 15. The gathering storm. Dusty rode slow out of town, the weight of the morning heavy on his shoulders. The mule's hooves kicked up little puffs of dust as they followed the narrow trail home. His eyes scanned the horizon, the sky darkening with storm clouds rolling in from the west. But it wasn't the weather that made his gut twist. He could feel it. Trouble wasn't done with him yet. Atop a rise near his homestead, Dusty paused and looked back. The town lay quiet in the distance, but the memory of Jed Turner's glare burned bright in his mind. Men like Jed didn't forget slights, real or imagined. And Dusty knew well enough that fear mixed with wounded pride was a dangerous thing. As the first drops of rain began to patter the dry earth, Dusty's gaze swept the prairie. There, Far off, riders moved along the ridge. Not a war party. A handful of scouts maybe, keeping watch. Comanche, no doubt, ensuring the peace Dusty had earned still held. The sight gave him a strange comfort. He touched the feather still tied at his throat. A promise, and a reminder. But as he reached his cabin, he found something that made his blood run cold. Fresh tracks, horses, maybe half a dozen, circling his place. The ground showed the marks of men dismounting, boot prints near his door, near the well, even behind the barn. Someone had been here while he was gone, watching, maybe waiting. Dusty slid from his saddle, boots landing soft in the wheatening earth. The storm's first true gust swept across the prairie, bending the grasses low, carrying with it the scent of rain and danger. He crouched, studying the tracks closer. Fresh, real fresh. The mud still clung wet to the edges of the prints. Whoever'd come calling had left not long before he crested that rise. His heart beat steady, his mind racing through possibilities. Jed Turner? Maybe. Or hired guns sent by some rancher fearing the Comanche's next move. Or worse, men looking to spark war where none existed. He eased to the cabin door, every sense sharp. The latch hung crooked, tampered with. He pushed it open slow, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, all was as he left it, save for one thing. His rifle, once hanging above the hearth, was gone. Dusty swore under his breath, scanning the room. His eyes caught it then. A scrap of dirty cloth snagged on the windowsill, as if someone had left in a hurry. The meaning was clear. They'd taken his gun, maybe to leave him helpless, or maybe to use it in some scheme to frame him, or worse. Thunder rolled across the sky as the storm drew closer, and with it came a certainty in Dusty's bones. This wasn't over. Not by half. Somebody was stirring up trouble, and Dusty Rawlings was square in the middle of it. And as lightning forked across the darkening heavens, a lone rider appeared on the far ridge, watching, waiting. The rider on the ridge sat motionless atop his horse, a silhouette framed by stormlit sky. Dusty squinted through the rain as it came in earnest now, stinging his face, blurring the world to streaks of gray. The figure didn't move, didn't signal, just watched. A man sent to spy or to threaten? Dusty couldn't tell. His cabin felt small behind him, his land too wide, too empty. He was exposed, and he knew it. Slowly, the rider turned his horse, disappearing over the ridge, swallowed by rain and distance. Dusty exhaled, realizing only then how tight his chest had been. But the relief was fleeting. He knew that kind of watching wasn't done for curiosity's sake. No, that rider would be reporting back. To men with plans Dusty couldn't yet see, but could feel coming like the storm itself. He went inside, shut the door against the rain, and barred it. The rifle's absence left the cabin feeling hollow, like part of him had been stolen. He set about checking what remained. A Colt and a handful of shells, his old scattergun with 2 cartridges, and the knife at his belt. It would have to do. Outside, the storm lashed the land, the wind carrying with it the howl of coyotes. Or was that something else, nearer, more dangerous? Dusty sat by the window, watching the night fall, knowing full well that come dawn, the real reckoning would begin. And, in that dark, he whispered to himself, "Hold, boy. Hold your ground." The storm hammered Dusty's cabin through the night, rain pelting the roof, wind rattling the shutters like the fingers of restless spirits. Inside, Dusty kept watch by the window, Colt across his knees, every creak of timber and groan of the wind sharpening his senses. Sleep was a luxury he dared not take. From time to time, the lightning lit up the prairie, and each flash revealed the same truth. No sign of riders, no shadowed figures creeping close. But Dusty knew better than to trust the dark. Men with ill intent didn't always ride up bold and brazen. No, the kind he feared most came like the night itself, silent, unseen, until it was too late. Toward morning, the storm broke, leaving behind a land washed clean but heavy with mud and uncertainty. A soft mist rose from the warming ground as the first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon. Dusty stepped out onto the porch, boots sinking in the soaked earth, eyes scanning the distance. There, faint but clear, fresh tracks leading from the ridge to the east, where the land rolled toward the canyon country. Whoever had come in the night hadn't come alone. At least 3 riders, maybe 4, judging by the prints. And they hadn't just passed by. They'd circled his place again, watching, measuring. Dusty's jaw tightened. So be it, he muttered. He'd fed a starving child and earned peace from a nation of warriors. But now it was his own kind he'd have to face. And as the sun broke through the clouds, Dusty saddled his mule, ready to ride out and meet whatever fate waited on the trail. Dusty rode east, following the tracks where they cut deep through the muddy earth, his eyes sharp, his colt close at hand. The morning sun glinted off pools left by the storm, and the air smelled clean, but the sense of trouble clung to him like the damp of his coat. The land grew rougher as he neared the canyon country. Gullies and outcrops, places where a man could disappear or lay in ambush without a trace. Dusty kept to the open where he could, mule steady beneath him, his mind working through what little he knew. Who were these men? Hired guns? Ranchers riled by fear and Jed Turner's lies? Or worse, drifters looking to profit off the chaos, to stir up war between settler and Comanche for their own gain? The trail led him to a narrow draw, walls rising steep on both sides. The tracks vanished there, lost to the rocky ground. Dusty reined in, listening, the silence heavy enough to feel. His heart beat slow, steady. He could smell the trap, the way a man who'd seen his share of ambushes can sense the coiled danger of unseen eyes. A pebble clattered down from the rim above. Dusty's hand went to his gun, but he held fire, waiting, watching. Then a voice called out, echoing off the stone. "Easy, Rollins. No need for shooting yet." 3 men stepped from behind a boulder, rifles in hand, faces hard. The scarred one in front grinned like a wolf. "Time. We had a little talk, you and us." And Dusty knew. This was the moment that would decide everything. Dusty sat tall in the saddle, his colt resting easy in his hand, pointed low but ready. The 3 men fanned out, their rifles loose at their sides, but their eyes sharp, measuring him like hunters, sizing up a cornered animal. The scarred man who'd spoken first took a slow step forward. "You made yourself a friend to the Comanche, Rollins. Folks don't take kindly to that. There's talk of you bringing war down on us all. We're here to put an end to it." Dusty's voice rang clear through the canyon, steady as bedrock. "If you think killing me'll stop trouble, you're wrong. It'll start the very war you're afraid of. That boy's people, they came in peace. You spill my blood, and there won't be no turning back." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The breeze stirred dust at their feet, and somewhere a hawk cried high above. Then the scarred man laughed, bitter and hard. "Fine words, Rollins, but I reckon you'll say anything to see another sunrise." Dusty's eyes narrowed. "You aiming to try me then? Make your move, or ride on and leave this be." The scarred man's hand twitched, but before it could rise, a new sound echoed through the canyon. Hoofbeats. Many. Fast. The gunmen spun, rifles raised. Dusty stayed still, knowing who came. Over the rise rode a dozen Comanche warriors, led by the boy Dusty had fed. They didn't charge, didn't shout. They simply came, silent and sure. Weapons at the ready but eyes watching, waiting to see who'd strike first. The scarred man cursed, his nerve breaking. "To hell with this," he hissed, turning his horse. The others followed, spurred by fear. The warriors let them go, watching until the dust swallowed them. The boy rode to Dusty's side, offering a nod of respect. No words were needed. Dusty nodded back, heart heavy but proud. Together they had turned the tide. And as the Comanche melted back into the wild, Dusty knew peace was fragile, earned one choice at a time. But today, it's still held.